Your story, our station.
If you've ever felt trapped in that endless top 40 loop, you know the feeling. Same songs, same sounds, same safe choices. Like the world hit repeat and lost the button to try something new. Today, I want to introduce you to a crew that's built to do the exact opposite. Change the station entirely. Bullet End Flight is based right in the heart of the 505, Albuquerque, where the green chili runs hot and the creative energy somehow runs even hotter. And when I say Bullet End Flight, I'm not talking about one single project or one single vibe. Think of it more like a parent company to a whole family of artistic misfits. People who don't fit neatly into the usual boxes, and honestly, don't want to. At the center of everything is a mission that's pretty simple to say, but not always easy to pull off. Elevate the voices that usually get talked over. The artists who get labeled too niche, or too different, or that weird one, too Albuquerque. Whatever that's supposed to mean. If you've ever heard something like that about your work, this is your invitation to pull up a chair. Because that's not a deal breaker here. That's the whole point. Bullet End Flight is built around inclusivity, creative community building, and giving underrepresented artists the megaphone they deserve. Not as a trend, not as a marketing angle, but as the core identity. It's a response to a creative world that can feel gated, filtered, and overly polished, where the most interesting voices get told to tone it down so they can be easier to sell. And here's where it gets fun. Bullet End Flight doesn't believe in staying in one lane. Because why would you? Why drive a sedan when you could take a spaceship? The whole approach is more like, what does human expression look like across every format? And then going after all of it. Let's start with music, because that's a major part of the DNA. The mindset here isn't pick a genre and stay in it. It's more like, what's the vibe and does it hit? That can mean the spiritual charge of gospel, the late-night pulse of house music, the smooth storytelling and emotion of R&B, or even that classic country charm where life falls apart but somehow the drink is still cold. It's not about fitting into a category. It's about making something that feels alive. But it doesn't stop at music. There's a strong dedication to the spoken word too. Podcasts that get into the real stuff, not just surface-level chatter, and poetry that doesn't play nice. The kind that lands heavy, the kind that says what people avoid saying, the kind that reminds you words can still be dangerous in the best way. Then there's film and TV writing. Getting into scripts that actually have a heartbeat. Not another recycled reboot of a reboot. Not something designed by committee to offend the fewest people possible. The focus is on stories with soul. Stories with perspective. Stories that sound like they came from real lives, in real places, with real edges. And of course, the stage. Because there is nothing like live performance. It's unpredictable, it's electric, and yeah, anything can happen. And usually does. The stage is where art stops being an idea and becomes a moment, right in front of people who can feel it in real time. So why would an artist want to plug into something like this? Because being a starving artist has been romanticized for way too long, and it doesn't need to be the default. And being a lonely artist, trying to build everything by yourself, with no village, no network, no support, That's even worse. Bullet and Flight is about building that village on purpose. The goal is to take the talent that's been brewing in the Southwest, often overlooked, often underestimated, and project it outward. Not in a please notice us kind of way, but in a we're already here, and we're bringing the whole sound with us kind of way. Bullet and Flight positions itself as a launch pad, a safety net, and the hype you didn't realize you were missing. And let's be honest, a lot of people are tired of gatekeepers. Tired of needing permission. Tired of feeling like they have to sand down everything interesting about their work to be taken seriously. If that's you, this is a space that's built for finding your tribe. People who want loud, weird, real art, and who aren't afraid to make it together. If you want to get in the mix, Deombase is https://just-dominic. And if you want the visuals, you can find the YouTube channel at @JustDominicMusic. Bullet and Flight Music, LLC is the company behind it all. And the invitation is open. Check out what's being built, listen to what's coming out, and if you're ready to change the station, this is a good place to start.
Inside Out on Bullet and Flight Radio. Real discussions with mental wellness professionals.
Welcome back to Bullet and Flight Radio. Your story, our station. Today we're stepping into a topic that sounds spiritual, psychological, and honestly, very practical all at once. We're talking about faith and hope, not as soft inspirational words, but as survival tools. The kind that help a human being keep dignity, clarity, and endurance when life turns loud and unstable. And I want to set the scene right away. Picture a world where leadership feels hostile, where institutions look shaky, where people are polarized and exhausted. If you've ever looked at the headlines and thought, how are we supposed to live like this without losing ourselves, then you already understand why this conversation matters. Because across ancient scripture, esoteric traditions, and modern mental health research, we keep running into the same message. Faith isn't passive. It's not just agreeing with the doctrine in your head. Faith is an active inner anchor, something you do, something you practice, something that keeps you from being dragged around by fear. Let's begin with a tradition that doesn't get enough attention in most mainstream conversations, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo perspective. In that world, you're not dealing with a cut-down, simplified story. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church holds an expanded biblical canon, 81 books, and it preserves very ancient material in a way that communities fiercely protected over centuries. In that framework, faith is often described with the word Haymanot. And what's important is that it's tied to the idea of Tewahedo, meaning unified, made one. That tells you something right away. Faith isn't a frozen opinion. It's alignment. It's unity between your inner life and what you understand to be divine order. It's an active covenant, like a living agreement that you renew through your choices. Now, one of the books that often comes up in this expanded Ethiopian canon conversation is First Enoch. And whether you read it as literal history, symbolic cosmic drama, or spiritual psychology wrapped in ancient language, the heartbeat is clear. It's describing turbulence, spiritual warfare, systems that look corrupted, power that looks untouchable. And into that chaos it drops a steady message. Keep aligning with righteousness, keep aligning with divine order, keep aligning with what is right, even when the crooked looks like it's winning. Because corrupt systems don't rule forever. In that worldview, cosmic justice isn't a comforting slogan. It's a structure. It's reality catching up. Faith becomes the practice of staying oriented toward that reality when everything around you tries to disorient you. If that sounds abstract, bring it into the world we live in. When governance is corrupt, when leadership overreaches, when people feel crushed by polarization, the question becomes, how do you resist without being ruined inside? That's where these older spiritual and historical frameworks become more than theology. They become equipment. One pattern that shows up again and again is that many ancient texts were written by communities living under empire. Babylon, Rome, regimes with absolute control. So these writings aren't what you produce when life is easy. They're what you write when you need a strategy for dignity. And here's a crucial piece: the demystification of political power. In texts like First Enoch and Jubilees, oppressive rulers aren't treated like gods. They're not treated like permanent fixtures. They're portrayed as temporary expressions of disorder, corruption that has a built-in expiration date. Tyranny, in that lens, eventually eats itself, not because people sit around wishing, but because moral decay collapses structures from the inside out. Now pause there. If you've ever felt swallowed by the feeling that power is unbeatable, that nothing changes, that corruption is forever, understand how radical it is for an ancient community to say, no, actually, it's bounded, it's limited, it's not ultimate. That belief alone can keep a person from surrendering mentally. And that leads to the next principle: refusing internal subjugation. In the Ethiopian Tuahido approach, endurance under injustice isn't the same as bowing down. It's spiritual sovereignty. It's holding your integrity so firmly that the oppressor cannot colonize your mind, your values, your moral clarity, or your community bonds. So faith becomes a kind of quiet rebellion. You will not become what the system is. You will not let it rewrite your conscience. You will not let it train you into despair. And now we step next door into esoteric and hermetic wisdom, because it speaks a similar language, just with different symbols. Hermeticism and other perennial traditions often separate shallow dogma from direct knowing, what they call gnosis. Not just believing something because you were told, but knowing through lived experience. In Hermetic thought, one of the foundational ideas is mentalism, summed up in phrases like the all is mind. Put simply, the inner world isn't a side issue. Your inner state shapes how you experience reality. As within, so without. In that view, faith is the disciplined direction of mind and spirit. It's deciding what you will feed, what you will focus on, what you will allow to occupy the throne of your attention. And that matters because attention is energy. When you pour your energy into panic all day, you're not just reacting. You're feeding the very atmosphere that keeps people trapped. Hermetic teachings also talk about rhythm and polarity. Political systems, social moods, collective fear, collective courage, they move in cycles. Tyranny rises when fear is high. But here's the twist. The more extreme the overreach, the more it creates the conditions for backlash, resistance, and eventually collapse. That doesn't mean you relax. It means you don't worship the moment. You don't assume the current season is the final season. There's also a warning in Hermetic thought that hits hard in modern times. Don't waste your life force on constant reactive fear, because outrage cycles can become an addiction. And if you're always reacting, you're not building. You're not organizing. You're not creating parallel strength. You're just being drained. So spiritual resistance, in that sense, starts with staying grounded internally while acting strategically externally. Calm doesn't mean passive. Calm means you're not easy to manipulate. Now let's talk about practical frameworks. Because it's one thing to say, have faith, keep hope. It's another thing to live under leadership that feels hostile and figure out what to do on a Tuesday afternoon. When top-down structures fail or actively cause harm, effective survival shifts. People stop waiting for the state to rescue them, and they start building resilience where they actually have influence. Locally, relationally, economically, spiritually, one of the clearest strategies that shows up across history is mutual aid and community networks. Communities make it through corrupt eras by strengthening local safety nets. Food security, local trade, community care, skill sharing, independent information channels. Not because it's trendy, but because it works. Another key is shifting attention toward local governance. When national leadership is unstable or hostile, city, county, and state-level structures can become the frontline defense for rights, standards, and community stability. People forget how much power is sitting in local decisions until they're forced to remember. And then there's a practice that might be the most underrated form of resistance today: disconnecting from outrage loops. Manufactured outrage is a business model. It drains people's cognitive energy, keeps them scattered, and leaves them feeling helpless. If you reduce exposure to performative media, you don't become uninformed. You become usable again. You get your problem-solving brain back. That brings us into the psychological side. Mental health professionals have a name for what chaotic political environments can create: chronic socio-political stress. And over time, that can shape something even more dangerous: learned helplessness. That feeling that nothing you do matters, so you stop doing anything. So what do psychologists recommend? Agency, but not fake agency. Real agency. You identify your exact sphere of influence. You can't control executive power by yourself, but you can control your daily habits. You can control who you support. You can control where your money goes. You can control how you structure your home life, your relationships, what you teach your children, the kind of community you participate in. That's not small. That's the difference between being psychologically crushed and staying upright. Another powerful psychological move is demythologizing political figures, seeing them as temporary actors in a larger cycle instead of omnipotent forces. That shift alone can prevent spiritual exhaustion. When you realize the system is historical, not magical, you stop sacrificing your nervous system to it. Back in the Ethiopian canon, another set of writings that speaks directly to pressure and persecution is Maccabean, often called Ethiopian Maccabees. And the theme there is faith as radical endurance, sayat. Not comfort, not convenience, endurance with integrity. The kind of endurance that says, you can pressure my body, you can threaten my status, but you cannot own my inner freedom. Now, here's the question many people are afraid to ask out loud. Why are faith and hope so essential to the human spirit? Why do these ideas keep reappearing in every tradition that's trying to keep people alive inside? Progressive faith leaders often say something that's both challenging and liberating. Faith has to evolve. If your faith is static and brittle, reality will eventually shatter it. But if faith matures, it becomes resilient. It moves from inherited assumptions to discernment, from slogans to compassion, from rigidity to strength. And hope, according to many scholars and psychologists, isn't denial. Hope is a horizon. It takes raw suffering and turns it into purposeful perseverance. It protects dignity. It gives you a reason to act today for a better tomorrow. Modern psychology, looking forward into our current era, increasingly treats faith and hope not as fluffy abstractions, but as pillars of resilience and even post-traumatic growth. There's a neurobiological side to this. When a person has hope and purpose, the brain's fear center, the amygdala, calms down. The prefrontal cortex, the part that helps you plan and solve problems, comes online. Your nervous system shifts out of constant fight or flight. Stress hormones like cortisol drop. And then there's existential psychology. Viktor Frankl said something that never stops being relevant. Human beings can endure almost anyhow if they have a why. Hope supplies the why. Hope makes suffering survivable without making it meaningless. Now, someone once asked me a question that sounds simple, but opens a deep door. Where does hope actually come from? Is it something outside of you that you find, or something inside of you that you grow? The answer is both, but the order matters. True hope starts internally, and then it's strengthened through connection. Think of it like a flow. An inner spark and self-awareness leads to conscious choices and values, and then that becomes external community and action. When we say hope comes from within, we're not pretending the world isn't chaotic. We're acknowledging that the external world changes constantly. The inner world is where you build a reservoir. Many esoteric teachings describe it as a divine spark within the individual. You access it through breath, quiet reflection, and returning to core values. That's where steadiness is born. But hope also spreads through shared humanity, through service, through community solidarity, through paying attention to nature and its repeated cycles of renewal. You see winter give way to spring, and some part of the psyche remembers this isn't permanent. For believers navigating turbulence, the teachings and actions of Jesus are often presented as a practical blueprint for maintaining faith under pressure. And even if you're listening from a more symbolic or philosophical angle, The stories carry psychological wisdom. Take the image of walking on water. Peter is moving forward, and then he gets pulled into the storm around him. He looks at the wind, he focuses on the chaos, and he starts sinking. The lesson isn't about physics. It's about attention. What you fix your gaze on shapes your stability. Fix your gaze on your highest values, your purpose, your mission, and you can move through conditions that would otherwise swallow you. Or the mustard seed. Jesus doesn't describe faith as something you either have perfectly or you don't have at all. He describes it as living, growing, small, active, persistent. That's such a different standard than the shame-based idea that you must be spiritually flawless to be effective. And then there's Gethsemane, one of the most human moments in the story. Jesus acknowledges anguish. He doesn't pretend it isn't painful. He doesn't deny grief. But he stays oriented toward purpose. That's a picture of mature faith, not suppressing pain, but honoring it without surrendering your mission. And finally, a detail people sometimes overlook. In the final hours, he serves, washing his disciples' feet. It's the opposite of helplessness. Outward service becomes an antidote to fear. When you can't control the world, you can still love someone in front of you. You can still be useful. And usefulness restores agency. Now, when global headlines feel heavy, it helps to remember that historical restructuring is not new. People have lived through collapses, transitions, empires rising and falling. The question isn't whether the world will shake. It's what you will anchor yourself to while it does. So what if you struggle with belief? What if doubt is your constant companion right now? There's a way through that doesn't require you to fake certainty. One approach is to shift from belief to practice. You don't need absolute spiritual certainty to begin living in a stabilizing way. Start with grounding practices, breath work, movement, exercise, routine, sleep, nutrition. Add daily acts of kindness. Practice becomes the bridge to faith, not the reward for having faith. Also reframe doubt. Doubt isn't always the enemy. Often doubt is the refining fire that transforms inherited ideas into genuine conviction. If you never question, you may never truly own what you claim to believe. And a practice that can change your nervous system quickly is what we could call micro-hope. Shrink your focus to the next 24 hours. What can you control today? One small constructive action, one phone call, one healthy meal, one walk, one supportive message. Micro-hope rebuilds agency step by step. Now we have to spend time with the Book of Jubilees because it's central in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo canon and deeply valued in other ancient communities as well, including the Essenes at Qumran. Jubilees presents itself as revelation given to Moses through the angel of the presence, and it retells Genesis and Exodus, but with a different emphasis. It isn't just retelling stories. It's trying to hand you a blueprint for faith, hope, and cosmic order during upheaval. It speaks to a human problem that always shows up in crisis. Time starts to feel chaotic, random, like suffering will never end. Jubilees pushes back against that feeling by describing time as structured. It divides history into specific units, 7-year weeks and 49-year Jubilee cycles, 7 times 7. Whatever you think about the literal mechanics, the spiritual message is strong. Crisis seasons are not permanent. History isn't a runaway train. There is a master architecture. So faith in Jubilees becomes the inner conviction that even when the world looks out of control, divine order is still progressing toward restoration. Your job is not to panic at the mess. Your job is to stay aligned with what you believe is true while the schedule unfolds. Jubilees also spends a lot of time on unseen dynamics, spiritual corruption, and the idea of adversarial forces. It talks about the Watchers. It talks about Mastema as a chief adversary figure. Again, whether you read this as literal beings or as symbolic language about temptation, corruption, and destructive impulses, the psychological effect is similar. It names the fact that evil tries to intimidate the human spirit. But then Jubilees add something that becomes the foundation for hope. Boundaries are placed on evil. There's a scene where Mastema wants permission for spirits to torment humanity, and the response is limitation. Only a fraction is allowed. The majority is restrained. The point is not to scare you with darkness. The point is to tell you darkness is restricted. It can test you, but it does not have unlimited authority. That's a different emotional posture than doom. It makes spiritual resistance feel meaningful. It makes alignment feel protective. Throughout Jubilees, there's also the theme of heavenly tablets, like an image of eternal law and destiny written beyond human politics. The contrast is sharp, eternal truth versus human corruption. And faith becomes the ongoing choice to align your mind, actions, and lifestyle with those unshakable principles rather than with shifting trends or mass panic. And that's where discernment comes in. This is where progressive faith actually meets ancient faith, moving beyond surface ritual into wisdom, into understanding cause and effect, into covenant loyalty that shows up in how you live, not just what you recite. Jubilees also expands on Abraham's trials. Where other tellings may highlight mainly the events, Jubilees leans into Abraham's inner endurance. It describes him being tested multiple times and surviving those trials through patience, through trust, through refusing to yield to fear or sabotage. And the takeaway for crisis times is blunt and useful. Faith is not the absence of hardship. Faith is refusing to forfeit your integrity when tested. Abraham's hope wasn't built on immediate comfort. It was built on the promise of an ultimate outcome. One more thing Jubilees offers is its vision of renewal. Instead of only imagining a final violent collapse, Jubilees describes progressive restoration, a gradual transformation as people return to truth, evil shrinking, joy increasing, peace extending step by step. That's a key message for anyone trying to keep hope alive. Hope is participatory. You don't just wait for restoration. You help bring it closer. Every act of faith, every act of justice, every inner alignment pulls a piece of the future into the present. And that brings us back to the central theme of today's episode, the active anchor. When you put Ethiopian scripture, esoteric wisdom, and modern psychology side by side, a timeless truth stands up in the middle of the table. Faith is action inwardly. Hope is vision outwardly. Together, they keep a human being from collapsing under trial. So before we close, let's gather the key takeaways in a way you can carry into your week. From the Ethiopian biblical perspective, in the expanded Tuahido canon, faith, Haymanot, is a living covenant. First Enoch teaches faith as continuous alignment with righteousness, even when corrupt systems seem dominant. Maccabean presents faith as radical endurance, spiritual freedom that survives physical hardship. From esoteric and Hermetic philosophy, the emphasis is on direct knowing, gnosis, and the principle of mentalism. As within, so without. Faith becomes the inner conviction that shapes experience. It's also alchemical, the ability to transmute fear and chaos, the lead, into wisdom and strength, the gold. From modern mental health perspectives, hope and purpose are not decorations. They're biology and psychology. Hope quiets the amygdala, activates the prefrontal cortex, and helps shift the body out of chronic stress. And on the existential level, Frankl's insight stands: when you have a why, you can endure the how. From progressive faith thinking, faith must mature. Rigid belief can crack under complexity. Mature faith becomes resilient, discerning, compassionate, and practical. And finally, where hope is found, it's cultivated within first, then strengthened through connection. Inner spark becomes conscious values, and those values become community action. The external world changes, but returning to breath, reflection, and core values gives you an inner reservoir. And hope spreads when you serve, when you stand in solidarity, when you remember renewal is part of the pattern of life. And if you're looking for a simple framework from the teachings of Jesus, keep your focus beyond the storm. Start with the mustard seed instead of demanding perfection. Honor your pain without losing your purpose, and choose service as an antidote to fear. If doubt is where you live right now, shrink your focus. Practice instead of forcing certainty. Let doubt become growth, and work with micro hope. One day, one action, one choice at a time. Thank you for listening to Bullet in Flight Radio. Your story, our station. That's all for today. Goodbye for now.
Inside Out on Bullet and Flight Radio. Real discussions with mental wellness professionals.
Your story, our station.